Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, 13 after 8 o'clock. Welcome to News and Views on Salam Media. Our first interview for the morning is with Sister Fatima Haron Masood. She is the daughter of the late Imam Haron, and of course this has to do, we here at Salam Media have committed to cover the trial, and the trial is now, the inquest rather, is in its second week. We have been giving you, our valued listeners and viewers, a regular update on the inquest, and inshallah we now have the daughter of the late Imam Haron, Fatima Haron Masood, to give us an overview of what unfolded at the inquest last week. Assalamu alaikum to you, dear Sister Fatima. Welcome to the program.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. To everyone in the studio, Sister Julie, and to all of the listeners of Salam Media, I really want to take this opportunity to thank you for covering the inquest and keeping your listeners informed as to what is happening regarding the inquest of my father.
Alhamdulillah, Fatima. I'm kind of wondering just how difficult has this past week been for the family. I'm talking from an emotional perspective. How have you guys managed to cope?
Alhamdulillah, 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 Allah kulli hal. We have to thank Allah for giving us the inner strength. When we listen to the testimonies from the forensic pathologist, I listened to the testimony from my brother, Professor Muhammad Harun, and my elder sister, Shamla Shamiz. We listened to our family pathologist, to the aeronautical engineer. Sister Julie, the agony and the anguish and the audio and the shock of our father's death over the many years has definitely had a great impact on us as individuals, as family members. Again, my brother was 12 years old, going on to 13 when my father died. My sister was then 17 years old by then, and I was only 6 years old. So I'm the youngest of the family, turning 7 just 2 days after his burial or his death. So for me, I had to help manage to carry the weight in terms of keeping his memory alive in Cape Town. Not because my siblings are not doing that. It's just that my sister lives in England. My brother has been living in Botswana for many years. But alhamdulillah, he's back. For him, the pain is much deeper because he saw a father figure in his life, loving him, comforting him, being there for him, supporting him, and then suddenly in his life, my father was then taken away for the ordeal of the shock of not knowing at that time, you're a young boy, what's happening around you. But alhamdulillah, again, we got our strength from Allah alone, and we managed to keep our heads high because we know why we're doing this, why this inquest is happening. It's because we've asked for it, and we prepared ourselves emotionally, mentally, to manage what we don't for the unknown. And lots of unknown came about. Lots of eyes that was covered up by the special branch at that time regarding the death of our father has been uncovered. We always believed our father never died by falling down a flight of stairs. It caused all the bruises and the injuries. So I just want to give your listeners a kind of introduction to what had happened, or a synopsis what had happened the past week, and where we're going into it of today, inshallah, if you will allow me. So
absolutely, inshallah. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. So the main reason to reopen the inquest was to give a background who Imam Abdullah Haron really was as a religious leader, who Imam Abdullah Haron was as a political activist, then of course why and the arrest and the detention, focusing on the health of prior to my father's detention, and of course my father's health during the detention. So my father was physically fit. He was a healthy 45-year-old gentleman going into prison, and of course his health definitely deteriorated under such brutal torture during detention period. And of course we had the expert evidence of our specialist forensic pathologist. Dr. Molefe was for the state and Dr. Naidu was for the family, and both pathologists came up with a conclusion that Imam Haron didn't just die from a fall of a flight of stairs. According to Dr. Schwar, who did the post-mortem in 1969, or after my father's murder. So Dr. Molefe for the state, her conclusion was drawn from that the preliminary report is that the police version, which was accepted by the magistrate, that the main injuries arose from a fall downstairs, is consistent with an objective forensic and analysis of the injuries as described in the post-mortem report of 1917. So inadequate medical examination, Dr. Molefe continues to say that the inadequate medical examination and post-mortem report noted serious shortcomings in Dr. Schwar, who was then the pathologist to do the post-mortem report, including a failure to document negative findings. In terms of Dr. Naidu, that was the family's pathologist, on Friday, so he said the injuries were of severe degree, moderately severe degree. The death was in all probability due to the combination of severe systematic psychological stress trauma resulting from the injuries with pre-existing coronary artery disease. The amount of force applied to my father's body to cause the injury should be regarded as substantial evidence. The injuries of the body do not correspond to the alleged or the allegation of a fall down a flight of stairs. Slip, that's what they say. He slipped and fell down a flight of stairs. The injuries are characteristic of a sustained continual physical assault. So this was in terms of what the findings was. In terms of my brother and my sister, Shamila Shamiz, who lives in England, she gave a bag. She did the first testimony on Thursday. So she gave a background of who my father was, where he lived, the kind of father he was. He was really, my father wanted all people to be empowered, especially women, and therefore he sent her to London to go and study radiography, because that time at the university or the colleges it was white only to study radiography, and he made a decision, a conscious decision, to send her away to London to live with family and friends to do her studies there. So and then of course when she took her, my father took her on Hajj of 1968, and then that was, I think Hajj was more or less November, October, during that period, and then he left to go to come back to South Africa, and then a few months later, of the following year of 1969, May, she was informed that my father was arrested. But that time there was no WhatsApp, there was no email, so people had to book calls from Cape Town to inform her. So the shock and the dismay and the agony of not knowing what was currently happening to my father, but what had happened, which was very interesting, just to share with your listeners, my father managed to write letters or smuggle letters out of prison. Sister Julie, I'm still amazed.
Yes.
My father had a red pen and a blue pen. So he wrote a letter to my sister, he wrote a letter to my mother, and he also wrote a letter to the late Barney Desai, who wrote the who wrote the book, The Killing of the Imam. So this came out in the letter. If you will allow me, I'll just read 2 lines of the letter, because I know I'm short of time. I also need to give you just my brother's verdict. He made 6 points or 5 points that he wants he wants the verdict of my father's case to be known under these 6 points. So, if you will allow me, Sister Julie.
Alhamdulillah, please. Alhamdulillah, please go ahead.
Okay. Please tell me, I'm writing to you this letter out of jail. I'm a
Okay, Fatima, you're breaking up. Can you just move around a little, please? You're breaking up. I don't want to lose any important information.
Sorry, I'm right here by the Wi-Fi.
Okay, just
can you
when
hear
we
me now?
started the... Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, all right. So let me start again. My father writes to her from prison. He says, "Dear Shana, I'm writing to you this letter out of jail. I'm a political detainee. Don't worry, it's for a good cause. When you write to mommy, don't mention that you received a letter from me. It will make things hard for me. This clean character letter is to Mr. Barney this time." I'm saying this, okay, so to your listeners, my father was fasting for the entire 123 days. So, and my mum used to send him coffee, sweets, and chocolates and biscuits every evening to the prison with a fresh set of cookies as well as soup. But my father was clever enough to write on the three crackers paper. That time, everything wasn't just plastic. It was brown paper, if the older generation will remember. So this is what I'm saying. This cracker letter is for Mr. Barnett this time. Get in touch with him, hand it to him personally. Don't mention there's a word that was redacted. It's top secret. Be careful. How is your studies? Study hard. Keep on writing the daily report. I'm not going to read the entire letter. What I'm trying to give you the essence of him. My father was in jail. He was, from the very day he was incarcerated, he was tortured every day. This is what we've now learned in the last week. Every day he was tortured. So even through his torture and his pain and his agony and the blow of torture, he managed to keep his spirit high, not suspected to be worried, asking about the studies, be careful, write a daily report. He's concerned as a father to a daughter. So this is even over and above. He put himself, he put others first before he put himself first. Again, he gave up his life he sacrificed his life for a cause, for a greater cause, so that people gain the freedom we're supposed to enjoy today, which is very highly cynical. But be that as it may, the letter is quite lengthy. I just want to say to you also, the fact that I'm the youngest, watching my siblings, older siblings, knowing that I had a physical relationship and with my father. I might have had that when I was a baby and growing up, but in my life, my father, I lost him in the early years of childhood. So for me, the pain is very deep because I've never had the opportunity to share or remember what he had done for me or said to me. So my brother and my sister can still remember that. And sometimes I feel a bit jealous, but I tell myself don't, because you still come from that bloodline. You try to be positive, and also they share memories of my father with me. Although over the years it was very difficult for my brother to share any kind of memory because the trauma of the emotional trauma, the stress and the shock of my father's arrest and his death had a great impact on his life. I mean, the story just continues, after his death, how my mother was being told she must leave the house. The family wanted the money. That trauma alone, that's another side of our history. And what my mother had to do, she found herself alone. My brother had to go live with French people, or people I would say rather. And I had to live with my mom, with her mother in a house with all the family living there. But my mother was a very strong, powerful woman in her own right. She managed to survive, alhamdulillah. She to learn to drive at the age of 43. She went out to work, never worked a day in her life outside of the house, and she went to work up until the age of 78 years old. My mother worked. So, alhamdulillah, all I can say, I'm grateful for my mother that we had, because she was a very, very powerful woman, very quiet, from community work, but she played a very important role in coming back to my brother's verdict, your very long testament, just to share with your listeners. And he said, I'm going to quote his own words, let my verdict of my father's case be known. Number one, it's my view as a son of the Imam that the reopened inquiry should arrive at the following decision, which is number one, that the findings of the first inquest was and remained highly problematic and unquestionably inaccurate. Secondly, that the furnished tangible evidence that the Imam fell from the staircase caused his death is not only a pack of legal lies, but they are outrageously absurd. Thirdly, that each of the special branch members who were involved in my father's death be posthumously or not found guilty of intentional torture and calculated murder. Fourthly, that all the stakeholders, such as the judiciary and the medical team, be posthumously stripped of their qualification for having compromised the oaths of honesty, so since they reached total indecision. And in addition to that, the act it should be pronounced amount to unprofessional conduct that is punishable. Fifthly, that the circulate report be used as a good example of total inaccuracy, that the fresh findings should not be declared as an erroneous report, but an untenable text in the post-apartheid, post-TLC era. Lastly, the High Court should reverse the defective decision that the incompetent magistrate made and flaw arguments that the useless mid-team presented. One saying that if you listen to the testimony from the pathologist unpacking all his bruises, his 27 bruises, there was a severe degree of bruises and intense in terms of the way they have tortured him. And my father complained about chest pains and severe headaches and stomach pains, and so this is the kind of things that he had to torture. He had to endure, and he was not given medical treatment. One of the sergeants went home to go and fetch medication which had an adverse effect on my father. They refused to allow him to see a doctor when he asked to see a doctor. So nowhere in history can a police or a layman, anybody prescribe medication for anybody, be it me or you, unless you're a doctor and you look at the patient. And between doctor and patient, there should be some kind of privacy, which was not. So Khanis and Spyker van Wyk were with my father 24/7. There are 3 days, I'm not all over the place, I'm so sorry. There are 3 days during the last days of his incarceration, between the 17th, 18th of 19th, my father just was out of trace. We can't find it in the inquest. They're trying to figure out where did they take my father for further torture. And this to us, we're trying to unpack where did they take him. There's no record. Usually there should be a record from the police files, nothing. Look, some of the evidence they're probably destroyed along the way. Also, I must tell you, what came out factually was that he definitely did not die from falling down a flight of stairs. That came out definitely in terms of his injuries, the way they characterized his injuries, the pathologist. He definitely didn't die from falling down the stairs. And as the judge has said when he listened to Dr. Naidu's report, even in my father's death, they humiliated him. One saying that in his death, they stripped him naked. In the mortuary, that one of the sergeants said they saw Imam's body. Underneath a pile of 2 bodies. So 2 other bodies were piled on top of him. Even as the judge, Valeria said, they humiliated his father. Even in his death, because, nowhere Not doesn't matter what whoever is dead, what they've done, but for any kind of post-mortem to take DNA can be soiled. All of these intricacies in terms of how to do pathologies and to find out the cause of the death, all of that. So even in his death, my father was humiliated. And one of the things that came out was that none of the pathologists saw this. We saw it for the first time a few months ago, was a photograph of my father lying in prison, dead. But, simply, my father, the way he laid, as my sister described my father so beautifully, she said, every cell in my father's body had Iman, every cell. And even in his death, he probably felt he was dying. He laid on his right hand side with his hand under his right hand cupped under his face in a fetal position. And as the pathologist said, they could see there was agonizing pain in terms of the way he died. Because usually when your ruh leaves your body stretches out like an alif, like the letter alif. But he was lying in a fetal position, which means the amount of trauma and pain, abuse, and the severe degree of torture had put him in that position. But I'm sorry, Sister Judy. So, for us, it is important that truth must be heard, as hard and difficult as it is to sit there and witness and listen to it. The fact, but we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for the greater good of humankind, and we're doing it for the greater good of South Africa and for the international world to look upon this case as a reference, which we would not like these kinds of torturous detainees to be tortured in this manner. But we don't know currently in the world. There is so much torture and abuse in prison going on across the world, unbeknown to us. But we want our father's legacy to be an example, not only to ourselves, but to the future generations that will one day do research and look at Imam Haron's text as a way of reference for whatever they want to do research on. So for us today is going to be an important day as well. We're going to be having two people going to be testifying. One of the people is called Jeremy Cronin, and he was placed under severe pressure with a psychological torture by Van Wyk. Jeremy Cronin speaks of Van Wyk as a psychopath of note. And then after that would be the last security officer that is alive during that period. His name is Johannes Hendrik Burger. He's going to be testifying today because he was the last one that saw my father alive. He was the one, when my father died at the Maitland police station, he was the one that held the keys. So he was the last one to see my father. So we're going to listen to his testimony today. So this
okay.
So from today onwards, we're going to be listening to all the testimonies until Thursday, inshallah.
All right. Fatima, we will be talking again with either you in the course of the week or one of the expert witnesses or even someone from the legal team regarding the reopening of this inquest of your dear late father, Imam Haron. And I'm so sorry for the pain you as a family are going through. I promise you that all of us here in South Africa feel your pain as well. It must have been so disturbing, so traumatic for you as a family to have come across all of this new evidence and the absolute torture, the unbelievable sadistic torture that your dear father had to experience at the hands of these monsters. But Allah give you all of you continued strength during this very difficult time. Be strong, inshallah, be strong. Justice is being served by the reopening of this inquest. We know that most of those people have passed on, but when I say justice will be served, it is to correct the historical narrative of this story and all the apartheid victims that have died at the hands of security police. So inshallah, strength to the family from everyone here at Salam Media, and we will be talking again in the course of the week. We keep you all in our du'as. Be strong. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
A very emotional Fatima Haron Masood, the daughter of the late Imam Haron, talking about the proceedings at the reopening of the inquest of the murder of Imam Haron. We, as I've indicated, here at Salam Media will continue covering the inquest till it closes. It's a story that needs to be told. It's a story that needs to be corrected. And we as humanitarian journalists will commit to continue telling these stories and many more such stories in the future. It is exactly 8:39 a.m. News and Views right here on Salam Media. Dr. Forslund, Dick Forslund, is on standby to talk to us about, yes, you've guessed right, more international loans, which equals to more debt and misery for you and I as ordinary taxpayers.